With due respect, that's crap.
It's clearly a broken promise.
Wanting the next 10 years to look like the last 10.
It's a big deal if the government's coming after your money. It's Australians.
Well,
it's
not
Australians'
mine
money.
again,
It's
because
not the
most of us don't
government's
have
piggy
millions
bank.
of dollars.
So, what's with all the biff? Super's meant to ease the burden of aged pension on taxpayers, partly by offering tax concessions to encourage voluntary contributions. But those concessions now cost the government more than $52 billion in lost revenue a year, nearly as much as the age pension itself.
If you've got more than $3 million in your account, well, you know, you're just minimising your tax. Simple as that.
So the Treasurer is considering capping concessions for the 36,000-odd retirees with more than $3 million in their super account. That could claw back around $1 billion a year.
Less than 1% of people have got more than $3 million in their super. The average amount that people have when they've got more than $3 million is $5.8 million.
But the PM's sounding more cautious.
There'll be no major changes to superannuation. We're not considering that.
That's probably because super is something of a sacred cow politically.
It's Australians' money. It's invested over a long period of time. And there needs to be great caution with changes to the rules.
The Coalition have undermined superannuation at every single opportunity.
You've got a reasonable balance in superannuation, and the government now is saying that they're going to tax it. And effectively, it's a retrospective arrangement.
The point is that people's retirement eggs, and you scare the living daylights out of them, and then you go, oh, no, it's not our fault. It's not our fault.
You scare the living daylights out of them, so you can't have a sensible conversation.
So if the rules are unfair and changing the rules is unfair too, how are we ever going to fix super?
Well, if anyone can answer this, it's Steve Price. Well, he might be able to answer it. What do you reckon, Steve? Does our super need fixing?
I don't think super is necessarily broken. It's complex. A lot of people don't understand it, Sarah, but we now seem to have a Labor government that's intent on mugging people who put more money into super than others, and this looks like it's going to change pretty quickly. I use the word mugging deliberately because before the election, Labor said there'd be no changes to super. Now, we've got a classic case here of a political party where you've got the Prime Minister still saying there'll be no major change. You've got the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, saying, well, we're going to look at the tax breaks. And you've got Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, in the middle saying, I want to define what it is. So what is the problem here that Labor's actually talking about?
Going back to first principles, what is super actually for at this point?
Well, it should be so that none of us go on a pension. Now, we've had some figures thrown at it this week about how much it costs the budget, and it's going to cost more than what the age pension is. Well, we've been asked not to go on the age pension. 1990, super came in, Paul Keating introduced it, and now you have to pay 12.5% of your salary every week into super. That's going to go to 15%. So you should have a nest egg of money when you retire that you don't have to go to the age pension and you can live off it. Now, what Labor's clearly doing here is a class war on people who've got a lot of money in super. And what'll happen in the budget, I suspect, is that anyone who's got... Look, yesterday it was 5 million, today it's 3. So tomorrow morning when I wake up, it'll probably be 2. But if you've got more in your super than that, I think what's going to happen is you currently pay 15% on any money that super fund earns. I think they're going to fiddle with that tax rate.
Class war. It's great to have the old Steve back. It's wonderful. But come back to your original point. So you said the whole purpose of this was to get people so they wouldn't rely on the pension, right? And that's why we have the concessions, so that we encourage people to put more in so they get to the point where they don't need the pension anymore. But if you've got 3 million, you're well past that point. The pension's not in your universe at all. So how is it of any benefit to the country to keep giving concessions to people who've already got $3 million there?
Well, it's not about giving the concessions. Obviously, what it's now about is taking those concessions away. Now, why would you punish people who've worked hard to put a lot of money into super?
You're flipping the question. The point is, once you get to... No, you are. Once you get to 3 million, at the moment you enjoy those concessions, right? But the point of those concessions is to try to encourage you to put more into super. But once you get to 3 million, do we need to encourage those people? Is it in the interest of the country that we encourage people who've got 3 million to keep putting more in super? Or is it fair enough at that point to say, you know what, that money, that should get taxed now like everyone else's income should get taxed?
So what you're saying is every dollar that your super fund earns, once you get past a certain level, and who's going to come up with the figure? Is it 5? Is it 3? Is it 2? One day will the government drop it down to 1?
Well, let's work with 3.
It's currently taxed... It's currently taxed at 15%.
Yep.
So what are you saying it should be taxed at? We're talking about people here who are retired, who are not working anymore.
But, Steve, the answer to that question is obvious what it should be taxed at. It gets taxed at the marginal rate. It's like any income. Like if you or I have shares that are not in super at the moment and we get income from that, that gets taxed at our marginal rate. All this would be saying is that once you get to 3 million, the country can now afford to tax it in that way. What I'm asking you is, how is it in the national interest not to do that?
They wouldn't be getting much tax revenue after the last financial year because my super went back by 10%. It earned nothing.
We're all deeply sorry.
I mean, the reality of this is... But Waleed, the government went to an election and said there'll be no changes. So how can they suddenly go... And both sides do it. Morrison was the worst.
Sure.
He was a super bandit.
That's fine, mate, but I'm asking you the policy question. I just want to know... How is it in the national interest?
And I'm asking you the political, moral question about making a promise there'll be no changes to super, and then when you get into government, you've been there 7 months, you suddenly go, no, we are going to change.
Sure, that sounds like a great question for the government, which is not me. All I want to ask you is the policy question. We're going to discuss the policy here, and I'm trying to ask you, how is it in the national interest to keep giving concessions to people who've already got 3 million? We don't need to incentivise them. We don't need to get them off the pension because they're not going anywhere near it. So the 36,000 people we're talking about,
how many people
how is that in the national interest?
How many people do you think have over $3 million in superannuation, Waleed?
36,000, I just quoted the number. So
that's not going to... It's going to claw back for the government perhaps $1 billion, which is a drop in the ocean. Why? This is why I call it class warfare. There's no political sense in this to buy this argument for Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese. They're flying all these kites, and I suspect Anthony Albanese's going, well, I don't know if we really want to buy this argument.
Pricey, are you one of the 36,000? And if so, can you adopt me?
I can't answer that question right now. I can answer the adoption part of the question, no.
Oh, come on, mate.
But I'm not answering the previous part of the question.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Oh, Pricey, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Pricey.
Thank you.